Yes, yes.
Or Stalger.
Mine says 1 o'clock.
Yours is right.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the May 9th, 2019 Board of Trustees for Waverly Utilities meeting. And we'll start. I was going to start with welcome to Karen, but we'll wait till she arrives. The other thing I wanted to kind of just mention was I really appreciated everybody making it to our retreat a couple of weeks ago. I thought that was really good. And the work of the staff and all the board members there was good discussion. I certainly learned a fair amount, and I think, got a pretty good idea of where we need to be going over the next few years. So thank you, everybody, for that. Okay, agenda management, motion and second to accept the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll open the public forum. Anybody, I don't see anybody that wants to speak, so we'll close the public forum. I'm looking for a motion and second to approve the minutes of the April 9th, 2019 regular meeting and the April 23rd retreat.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll move down to the action items in internal control inventory. Casey.
This month we tested the inventory for Waverly Utilities, and I cycle counted a few items and talked with Darwin through the inventory process that you're in, and I did not find any deficiencies.
Motion and second to accept the internal control report.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the financial audit, Casey.
Well, Brad Tyson speak.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I have a quick handout just to pass around, and then I'll walk through the financial statements. My plan is just to kind of walk through the financial statements. I gave you a little bit of a background information there. First, I guess I should back up and say I'm Brad Tyson with Eide Bailey. I'm a manager with Eide Bailey out of our Dubuque office. We started the audit process in January of this year, going back and forth, kind of making some requests to management. When we were in the field here in Waverly during the month of February, completing field work. And then we kind of had some back and forth on the wrap-up process. And I guess this is sort of like the culmination of the wrap-up process, just to kind of see if you have any final questions or anything like that. So I'll kind of get started going through the financial statements, which I think everybody has in front of them. If you turn to page 1, this is our opinion on the financial statements. And basically what it is, so it kind of starts there by saying we're auditing two separate individual entities, the communications utility and the electric utility. Both are separate from each other, and both are considered component units of the city. So they're reportable to the city of Waverly as well. So The other thing it kind of distinguishes here on page 1 is our responsibility versus management's responsibility. Management has the responsibility to put the financial statements together in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, which are promulgated by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. So it's a little bit different than like a private sector entity. Standards are just a little bit different for the most part, but management has that responsibility. They also have the responsibility to review internal controls, which is something that just happened at the board meeting. So to make sure that those controls are effective and operating efficiently on a day-to-day basis too. So our responsibility is to opine on the financial statements, especially each of the separate entities, the electric utility and the communications utility separately. And we do that in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and governmental auditing standards. So there's two kind of standard setting bodies there. Generally accepted auditing standards is set by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and then governmental auditing standards is set by the federal government too. So, which kind of mirrors what the AICPA does, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants. So, there's a couple separate distinctions with the government auditing standards report that we'll get into later on. One of the other responsibilities that we have as far as internal controls go is we review internal controls from a financial statement perspective. So there's a little bit of a difference there between what we're doing and what management is doing. Management is reviewing them on a month-to-month or a day-to-day basis to make sure that internal controls are effective and operating efficiently. We're just reviewing internal controls from a financial statement perspective in order to decide what the best audit procedures are in those circumstances. So a little bit of a difference there. So we're just merely obtaining an understanding of them and making sure that our audit procedures kind of fit into those. So that's kind of the first page. The second page, the opinion paragraph is kind of the meat and potatoes of the audit opinion, I guess. It basically is just saying that we opined on each one of these entities separately and found them to be presented fairly in all material respects, and that we had no issues with how they're presented. So it's kind of a clean bill of health, I guess, so to say. The next paragraph, we have an emphasis of a matter in there, and what that does is it talks about a new accounting principle that was adopted this year. And it's called GASB 75 for other post-employment benefits. And we'll get into that a little bit more as the presentation goes on too. So then it kind of talks about required supplemental information too. What the RSI is it's after the notes to the basic financial statements, and it's included, and it talks about other post-employment benefits and net pension liabilities. And it basically just gives some historical context to what those two items are. So, and then there's some other information included in the report too. So, and then on the last page it talks about our government auditing standards report, which I'll go over at the end of this too. So, if you flip to page 4, this is the start of the management's discussion and analysis. And basically what this does is it's kind of like a year-over-year analysis of the changes in net position of both entities. So it's a very good synopsis as to what is different this year than last year. Are we better off this year than last year, sort of thing. And it actually has 3 years worth of information in it. Since the basic financial statements are 2 years worth of information, 2018 and 2017, the management discussion and analysis has to cover 3 years worth of information. So it's got 2018, 17, and 16 information in it. So a very good analysis of kind of where you've been and what the changes were this year and possibly where you're headed going forward too. It just kind of highlights some of the major classifications of the statement of net position and the statement of operations too. So as we flip to page 14, pages 14, 15 and 16, 17, 18, and 19 are the statement of net position, the statement of operations, and the statement of cash flows. And this is where the basic financial statements start. So when we give an opinion on the financial statements, it covers just the basic financial statements themselves. So we're not actually giving an opinion on the management's discussion and analysis or the required supplementary information at the end. It's just the basic financial statements and the notes to the financial statements. And these reports are just kind of a comparative analysis of the individual classifications of the statement of net position, statement of operations. So you can kind of look and see what revenues were last year versus this year, what your current assets were last year versus this year for each entity. So the notes to the financial statements start on page 20. The notes basically are just kind of go through the major classifications in greater detail and some of the year-to-year changes. So it'll give you more information on other post-employment benefits, capital assets, net pension liabilities, that sort of thing. It just goes into a lot more detail than what's on the face of the statements if you're interested about any of those individually. And it also gives some background about the accounting policies that are adopted by Waverly Utilities as well. So I'll touch on the RSI, the required supplementary information, quick. That starts on page 57. So this includes the net pension liabilities of the entity, or of the entities, I should say, and the other post-employment benefits. And what these are, the net pension liability standards were rolled out in 2015. So as you can see there on page 57, it has 4 years worth of information about what those liabilities have been and sort of, what they are now. And for those of you who don't know, basically what that is that's IPER's. IPER's plan, IPER's at the state level, their plan is not fully funded. So what they do is they push that liability down to the entities that contribute to IPER's. So you can see they pushed a liability down to the Waverly Communications and Electric Utility of $2.1 million, or $2,167,000. So, and that's not something that the utilities would necessarily fund, going forward. That's just what the unfunded balance is of the state plan. So,
and all entities have to have that in their books. Schools, city government, county government.
Hospital, our hospital does.
exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, and then there's some information I think on page 60. Since this is the first year of GASB statement number 75 with other post-employment benefits, this is the first year that was required to be put in there as well. And this just has to do with healthcare costs. Since you allow retirees to stay on your healthcare plan at an implicit rate, the utilities needed to have an actuarial study done to say what is the cost of that plan and what do we think the liability is related to that plan going forward. So once this goes on for a couple of years, you'll have a little more historical context there that you can look at in that schedule. So after that, there's supplemental information, which is kind of just various information that's included by management. It gives a little bit of information, going back about certain operating statistics and expenses and energy disposition and some other things. That information, like I said before, is not part of the basic financial statement, so it's not audited. It's not opined on by I. Bailey. But if there is information in it that is comparable, or if the information in our basic financial statement system is in that information as well, if the two are consistent, then we made sure that they're consistent with each other. So. Page 72 is the Government Auditing Standards Report. And this is probably one of the nice things about being a government is, government auditing standards is required by Chapter 11 of the Code of Iowa, so any governmental entity within the state has to have a government auditing standards audit done. And what that requires us to do, or one of the things that requires us to do, is put together this separate letter where we go in and look at any internal controls within the entity. And it basically categorizes internal controls into 3 different parts. At the lower level, you have internal control deficiencies. Slightly more significant than that would be a significant deficiency. And then the top, I guess, of the pyramid, as you would think of it, would be a material weakness. And what we have to do is if we find any sort of significant deficiency or material weakness within the internal controls of the entity, we would have to communicate that in this report. So as you flip through this report, it kind of defines what those internal control deficiencies are. And then it says that we did not find any material weaknesses and have no significant deficiencies to report for either of the utilities. So a very clean bill of health there, I guess I would say. So, and then we also need to, I guess if you go to page 74, we also have certain procedures that we're required to perform by the state auditor's office. One of which I know is probably more important to the communications utility, and that is anytime we do an audit of a communications utility, we're required to perform some tests to make sure that one utility is not supplementing the other or giving some sort of subsidy to the other one. So we pick a sample of expenses from year to year just to make sure that those expenses are allocated appropriately between the two entities. So we've done that and we found no issues there. So that's kind of a very quick, I guess, synopsis of the report. Any questions at all?
Yeah, Brad, just for clarification, you said no joint financing between the two or subsidization between the two. But isn't it a true statement that the telecommunications utility could subsidize the electric utility?
It is true, yes. I think the way the state code is written, and I think it was, don't quote me on this, but I think it was lobbied by all of the communications companies, and I don't know if this goes back 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it was, that if they're in the private industry of selling cable, that they don't want governments kind of honing in on that activity. So I think it just works just the one way. Yeah. So they could if they wanted to, I believe. Yeah. So that's kind of the financial statement overview. I kind of put some financial results on that handout. And I guess, just to kind of go over that a little bit quickly, I guess what I would say is the electric utility net operating revenues, so that's operating expenses operating revenues less operating expenses are very similar from year to year. And the subsidy to the city or transfer to the city of Waverly is very similar. So a very consistent activity there. The communications utility had an increase in cable subscribers and internet customers during the year. So there's a large increase in revenues, which I think was expected. I think FY17 was the first full year of operations for the communications utility, with 2018 to the second full year. So and there's expected growth going on there going forward too. So and with the operating expenses of the cable utility, last year there was some large sort of like startup expenses that fell into that year too. So the expenses went down and revenues went up, which is a very good sign. Probably not, where you want to be yet, but there's definitely growth going on there going forward. So there was a little bit of a change in the deferred inflow for rate stabilization, which was about $50,000. So I think last year, so the deferred rate stabilization kind of allows the entity to put money into revenue or take money out of revenue anytime there's kind of like a more collected than expected, or what it allows you to do is keep your rates stable from year to year. So this year there was a little bit of withdrawal from that, not much. The advance to the communications utility was fairly consistent from last year to this year. I have a little bit of information on here about pension reporting and OPEB reporting too, which we kind of covered a little bit when we went through the financial statements. I don't know if there's any other questions on those two. I know OPEB is new this year, so the way it was done this year with an actuarial study was quite a bit different than last year, with management just kind of coming up with an estimate. Probably the biggest difference between the two accounting principles, the way it used to be and the way it is now, is that under the old accounting principles, the estimate that they thought of for the total other post-employment benefit liability was sort of rolled on the books over a period of time. This year, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board just kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and said, we're just going to put it on there because we don't want to take 30 years to get it on. So there's some information on there too. If you have any questions, I can try to address those too. But other than that, as far as the audit results go, No material weaknesses or significant deficiencies, which we kind of covered. No state compliance issues. No major changes are expected for 2019. I know the way things are going with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, it seems like they adopt a new accounting principle every other month. Luckily, we've sort of implemented most of those within the past 3 to 4 years now. So the big one that'll be coming up will be the lease standard, which I think will be in 2020. So any sort of lease that the entity has, the way the lease standards are written now, in order for it to be something that's considered a capital lease, to put it on the books on the balance sheet or on the statement of net position, it has to meet one of 4 tests, which most leases are kind of written to avoid that test. The way that standard is written, which will be adopted in 2020, is it's going to put just about anything on the statement of net position that could be considered a lease or a rental payment. So. And I think we kind of reviewed that a little bit with Casey and Stacy this year, and I don't think there's a whole lot of significant lease activity that Waverly would have. So it might not be that big of a change for Waverly Utilities, but I know it's a big change nationwide for a lot of entities.
And so Casey, excuse me, Amy, what type of leases would this cover? Could you give us an example?
I was out on maternity leave when you guys talked about it, so I wasn't with Stacy, but I believe is it copiers?
Yeah, in one caveat, I guess I would start with is you would only need to record them if they were significant to the entity. So a lot of times we'll see copier leases, and if it's not over, $5,000 or $10,000, I don't know that I would put it on the books and capitalize it and then depreciate it every year for 5 years. Just doesn't seem like there'd be a whole lot of significance to it.
So for electric, I don't know of any significant leases there. Was that
Other than telecommunications, leasing fiber optic from the electric.
And that might be something we have to discuss going forward too. I'm not sure how exactly that works because they do lease some of the communication system. Is that right?
The fibers.
Okay, or the fiber. Okay.
So is there a dollar amount that is going to be capitalized versus lease?
Well, okay, so I guess what I would start with is each entity has their own capitalization policy, and I can't remember exactly what Waverly's is. I'm guessing it's $5,000 or $10,000 per asset. If it's over that, I guess I would start to look into it and say, is this significant, and do we want to capitalize it and put it on the books going forward? So, and that's something we can discuss too going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So, Brad, I know, I'm on other organizations, and sometimes we ask the auditor, since they go out and look at other communities or other institutions like us, and we got the public on, could you kind of give an assessment, compared to other electric utilities, how we're rating, or do you think we're good compared to other ones, or where, and maybe in our communication, knowing that we're only in the startup mode, how do we compare to others in that same type of startup mode? So could you give the confidence to the public that we're doing okay, or do we have some issues, or what would you tell our public?
I guess what I would say is, as far as the communications utility goes, it's kind of tough to tell because you're in that startup mode process yet, so you're still having some initial operating costs that you're expensing from year to year that you hope to not have going forward. Anytime that you have a net loss, you're definitely looking to improve upon the situation that you're going on. So I would say going forward, you're definitely looking to improve there. I don't think by any means you're in dire straits, so I guess I don't want to give any sort of false opinion there. But as far as the electric utility goes, it's tough to tell from city to city, entity to entity, because their subsidies to the general fund are so much different. Some have a subsidy like this or a transfer to the city. Some have a payment in lieu of taxes. Obviously, when you have a bottom line of, I think it's about $1 million in net operating revenue, you're doing something right. And that's very consistent between the 2 years, between FY17 and FY18. So I would say a very consistent electric utility is what we see from entity to entity, not necessarily comparable bottom lines and assets versus liabilities or the way they're leveraged or anything like that. It's kind of tough to compare. but the fact that you can subsidize the city with that transfer, I think is a very good.
Yeah, and we do a transfer, Daryl can talk this, it's in lieu of taxes plus something, so the city people benefit from utility because of that. You would say that, Daryl?
Correct. So our pilot fee consists of a mill levy of about .034 cents per kilowatt hour sold, plus the electric use of the street lights, the traffic camera lights, plus the $120,000 that we donate for the W. So it comes up to about 4.3% of our gross revenues, I believe.
Good. And some cities don't, some municipalities don't give that much to their cities. They're just doing in lieu of taxes.
Yeah, it just kind of varies by entity. To be completely honest, there's not a whole lot of electric utilities that there's a lot of electric utilities that we audit that are considered cooperatives. We do not audit a whole lot of electric utilities that are municipally owned.
Okay.
I can only think of one or two off the top of my head, and those two are very, they've been around for a long time. So everything's sort of negotiated there between their board and the city council. So.
Good, thank you.
I work for the hospital, and so I like your clean bill of health statement. We like those too at Waverly Health Center. But I'm not surprised by this because our staff is hardworking and good at what they do and dedicated, but no material weaknesses or significant internal control deficiencies, no state compliance issues reported. And that seems pretty spectacular to me.
It is for an entity of this size, and I don't want to give the appearance that an entity of this size is very small, but there's a lot of entities within the state of Iowa that have issues, and they go on from year to year to year. We see segregation of duties as an issue in a lot of places,
Sure.
And there's just kind of that, well, we had it last year, we can't do much to get rid of it. There's sort of that attitude, I think, that goes on with a lot of people, but that's not the case here, and that's a very good thing, because segregation of duties can be something that's very, I don't know if I want to say dangerous, but it can be something that once you learn to live with it, it's people just kind of expect to see it and don't really think anything of it. But yeah, I would say an entity definitely of this size that has no internal control deficiencies, significant deficiencies, or material weaknesses is a very good thing. That's something you should be very proud of. And reviewing internal controls on a month-to-month basis is a great practice, especially with all the changes that you have going on, not just from possibly a personnel issue, but generally accepted accounting principles is changing all the time. So it's definitely good to be looking at these things on a month-to-month basis and approving who's initiating, authorizing, recording, processing, reconciling, reporting these transactions on a month-to-month basis. So.
Just like to take a second to recognize staff for addressing that segregation of duties. When I first got here in 2014, we were dinged for separation of duties, and brought the management team together and said, can we do better? And every department stepped up, and they split up a lot of that duties in their department, even though it's not under their heading. They do certain things so that we get separation of duties. So thank you.
Brad, I appreciate this summary sheet too. This is helpful to kind of highlight the things that we should be paying attention to as well. Any other questions? All right, thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Entertain motion and second to accept financial audit as presented.
Move approval.
Second.
Any other discussion or questions?
I just, one thing for the public, this is online. They did a very good job. It tells a lot of history, a lot of information for our public utilities, so it can answer a lot of questions. So I would encourage the public to go out and read, not all 172 pages, but it's very good.
Maybe they want to read it.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, no information items, we'll move on to other business, nothing there. Board calendar. Anything we should be aware of in the board calendar?
I think next month, don't we move it up early as well, June 6th, because the national is, falls on the 11th. We'll keep that in mind, we'll be going early next month as well.
I did hear from Karen, she got pulled away and something that she needs to attend to, so she's sorry she can't be here today, but wants you to know that. She looks forward to visiting us again.
Good, thanks, Emma.
You're welcome.
Okay. Nothing else on the calendar? We'll go ahead and move to action items. Ratify the trade accounts. Casey?
Most of you, just your standard monthly expenses. There was two different things. We did pay the insurance this month, and we also did buy a new Freightliner aerial lift truck.
Take a look at this real quick. Entertain motion second to approve trade accounts.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we'll review the financials. Back to Casey.
Total revenues year-to-date are $29,000 higher than the 2019 year-to-date budget. We would attribute this to favorable weather condition. Kilowatt-hour sales for the month are 370,000 higher than they were in March of 2018. Total operating expenses year-to-date are 200,000 lower than our year-to-date budget. This is due to timing of expenses, as well as generation and distribution, as well as billing expenses being lower than anticipated. So our net income year-to-date is 290,000 higher than what we had anticipated in the budget. We do feel we're on track to meet our budget.
So just to clarify, favorable weather means it was really cold and not nice out. So,
All right, good. Entertain motion second to approve financials as presented.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, resolution number 15-19, reimbursement resolution, Casey.
So this is, should we decide to bond in the next 18 months, we can include these purchases on there. So the only items we had this month were Louisa and WS4, generation and transmission assets.
All right. Entertain motion second to approve resolution 15-19 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Secretary, please call roll.
Sagerman.
Yes.
Neuendorf.
Yes.
Brunkhorst.
Aye.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Brunson.
Yes.
Resolution approved. Okay, resolution number 16-19, operation policies and procedures modifications. Kurt.
Yeah, staff took opportunity to review street and security lights and utility pole operation policies in the last month. There were no identifiable changes this go around, so mostly just for the board's review on this resolution.
Entertain motion second to approve resolution 16-19.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Secretary, please call roll.
Neuendorf.
Yes.
Brunson.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Sagerman.
Yes.
Brunkhorst.
Aye. Resolution 17-19. Approve the use of $50,000 of deferred inflows for rate stabilization for 2018 financials. Casey.
So this was, Brad talked about this a little bit. We didn't finalize financials till after the last board meeting, so we're kind of his presentation and then this. But to keep the ratios, kind of in line and consistent with where they've been year to year, we needed to pull $50,000 out of the deferred revenue account into the 2018 financials. So after this, there'll still be a balance of $1,475,294 that we can use in future years should we need to.
Entertained motion second to approve Resolution 17-19.
Move approval.
Second.
Any questions on this?
So Casey, this is 2018 and we're in May. How long do you have to do this for 2018?
So we didn't finalize the financials until I was back from maternity leave, which is pretty standard. Typically, we have to wait for the IPERS information. So until we get the last piece from IPERS, we can't, this is like the last piece that we have to do. Once we get IPERS all booked, then we look at where we're sitting and determine, do we need to use some of that deferred revenue or are we okay? I mean, because the IPERS piece and net pension liability can make a pretty big impact one way or the other.
And what key financial ratio are we trying to improve with this?
Any of the ones that are set in the board policy.
Okay. Anyone which one comes out in mind?
I would say a big one is the debt service coverage.
Okay.
To make sure you're meeting your debt service coverage, because Moody's will look at that every time. So if you decide to go out for a bond in the future, they're going to look back at that and, well, what has your debt service coverage been year over year?
Yep. So that's a key one that we want to make sure is good. Yep. Great. Thank you.
Did we, remind me, how much, if any, did we budget for this year?
We said we were going to use $500,000, I believe. It was quite significant.
That was in the budget anyway?
Yeah,
Okay.
that won't be in there. We were going to use a lot more than what we needed to. In the budget, we had scheduled to use a lot more than what we needed to at the end. How does this?
That's, you're talking about 2018.
Right. Oh, you mean for 2019?
Well, then in 2019, I was just curious how much we.
I can't remember. I'll have to
Yeah.
look.
Well, it's one to kind of keep an eye on because we certainly want to watch the level of that fund.
I can tell you, Jeff has
okay.
his. We're going to use $600,000 is what we have in the budget
That's what we
this year.
budgeted for.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. So last year we budgeted we were going to use $300,000. I was off a little bit.
What did we use the year before?
In 2017, we put in $500,000 to the fund. In 2016, we put in $800,000.
But, kind of the ebbs and flows of this, like Brad described, it's something to try to stabilize and be able to keep our rates and keep our ratios and so on. But, too many years of using it would be sort of an indication something needs to change, right?
Yeah, I mean, once you use it, it's gone. So then your only choice is to raise rates. So
Right. Any other discussion? Secretary, please call roll.
Brunkhorst.
Aye.
Sagerman.
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Brunson.
Yes.
Niendorf.
Yes.
Okay, information items. Casey, the general operating information.
So you all should have this little book also at your desk with the audit. This book just kind of gives a summary over the last 10 years, what's happened with the utility. We look at peak load, degree days, average monthly temperatures, so you can kind of see, year over year what's happened. Analysis of a lot of information in 2018, what did we have for sales, what did we generate between all of our different, hydros, wind and solar. It also then gets into operating expenses and gets pretty detailed, so you can see 2017 versus 2018, what we spent. We do get into some fixed assets, what we spent on that. There's also some energy efficiency results on what we paid out. We do have our current insurance coverage in here. Employment, how many hours we worked amongst the team for the last 10 years. Security and streetlights that we have in place and that we pay for, as well as the meters that we have in service.
And there's a lot of great information in here too, when you're talking about, this would be another thing that the public might be interested in.
This is a nice recap.
Yeah, because this is a little simplified in terms of, being able to look at it. one thing that I note, and there's a whole, we could talk about this all day, and I don't want to, but on page 9, it's sort of interesting, the cost per kilowatt hour net, gross and net. Louisa is very low. Is it because the debt paid off or something? Or do you know why that would be?
Yeah, I really don't. Oh my God. You have to keep in mind that Louisa, we sell it into the MISO market.
Yeah.
Mean sells it in
Right.
for us and then buys it back, and we pay Mean. We do get the difference in price. So maybe the last time we looked at the 2 coal plants, we receive about $500,000 a year by owning those 2 coal plants. So something we watched. The question came up a year or 2 ago, should we still own those? Are they still beneficial to Waverly? And when we ran the scenario, it was $500,000 a year in revenue. So yeah, we want to keep them.
Yeah.
But Darrell, you would say 3 cents is particularly a large electrical generation is around 3 cents.
Correct.
And with our purchase power, 7 cents, isn't there some transmission costs built in that one?
Not so much transmission, but the fixed cost recovery charge. So when Mean went out and bought into coal plants and other generation resources, they picked up about $150 million in debt. So we have a share of that debt. Our tie to Mean through 2041 is to pay off all that debt.
Yeah, and we're probably not seeing that, we're not seeing that come through on either Louisa or Walter Scott.
And then with the capital improvements that we send to Louisa and Walter Scott every month, we get a reimbursement back from Mean for those capital. I don't know exactly how it works, but we spend the money and then Mean gives it back to us.
It's a rolling, we look at what the history has been the last few years, and that's what they would pay back to us, and now we calculate it once a year.
Because of the ownership arrangement, we couldn't just sell our ownership shares to Mean. First right of refusal would go back to the other owners, so we would have lost our ownership rights and Mean couldn't have got them. So it's still a cost-effective resource to have.
I see on page 6, the wind production, something must have got entered in a little bit wrong. On November, he spiked on skeets.
Yeah. We'll take a look at that. It's really windy.
It's a windy month. Any other questions? It's good. Thank you, Casey. And we have the mini booklet here too. Is that right?
Yes, the mini booklet is just obviously a smaller version than what you've received there. So this is something that we hand out to the board members as well as our staff members, and something that you can just keep with you to refer to, quick and easy. If you have any questions, you can kind of pull this out, and it gives you an overview of what Casey has presented in the bigger books. And so if you need extras, let me know. I have extras, and we also share these with the staff. And this is based off the 2018, since the audit information is completely done.
Going back to the big book, there's just a couple things I'd like to point out to the board. One on page 19 on full-time employees. You'll notice in 2016 we shot up. Telecom employees are included in those figures. So just keep that in mind. That's both electric and telecommunication employees. And then if you flip back to 8 and look at the distribution system load factor, we've talked about this. So load factor is if you set a 5 kW air conditioner in motion, you're setting a peak of 5 kW. And if it runs full out for an hour, you've got 5 kilowatt hours. But when it cycles down, you go down to just about no kilowatt hours. So that's called load factor. Now what you want is 100% load factor. That's the best of all worlds. And when we were talking about electric vehicles charging at night, the impact they could have on load factor would be very beneficial for the utility. So just keep that in mind as we think about load factor. Any way we can get load factor, sell more kilowatt hours 24 hours a day and get them off the peak hours is good for the utility and the customers. So.
And just, the load factor here for 2018 was about 52%. So that means we were using about 52% of the kind of maximum capacity.
So the peak that was set, we're only selling about 50% of the kilowatt hours to match that peak.
Okay, yeah, okay.
So you notice 10 years ago, it's set at 62% load factor. We were selling more kilowatt hours based on the peak set.
And you need to have your capacity, above your peak, so.
And then Kurt probably helped me out here, but on our larger industrials, we have load factor designations that they've got to hit. If they don't hit that load factor, they're actually penalized by not meeting that 90% load factor. That's why they get that discounted rate, because they set a peak and then they run full out right here. So we sell a lot of kilowatt hours to our large industrial, but it's also very close to their peak. Where a residential house sets that 5 kW peak and then they run about 1 kW for the other 24 hours. So you peak, but you use very little kilowatt hours, load factor.
And Darrell, on the chart above the distribution line loss, do you say that's in line? Or, why would like 2016, 17 high? Or can you help me out on understanding?
Yes, anything below 7% is good. So line loss would just be the electrons flowing through the transmission grid. They get to the distribution system, and then they flow through those wires, and there's a loss. They're just an energy loss, heat, friction. So what is that loss? And if you start going above 7%, you need to start looking for reasons why. Sometimes it could be harmonics with fluorescent lights in the school. It's the harmonics that create some problems. I hope I'm not getting technology mixed up here, but it's why are you losing more through that line than you should. So you hear them talk about DC circuits versus AC. DC circuits lose less energy per mile than an AC circuit because of the heat and the friction and the voltage, and it goes back to Ohm's law. But anything below 7 is good.
So why are we so variable? And then that's probably a question for Kurt. Why does it jump up and down?
It's really the nature of the beast. Line loss, you really can't say that's it. That's line loss. There it is. There's really, I've never found a good reason why we can't steady it out, keep it at this level. The national average is keep it below 7% or else you got a problem.
This could be a stupid question. Does weather play a factor in any of that at all?
It could. Yeah. Because you're talking about heat heat through the wires, and that causes loss. The last big outage was 3 major voltage lines sagging down into the trees. So that heat, the line loss, the line sagging, it all contributes to that. And I'd really need an engineer to give you a very good explanation of line loss.
I don't want a very good.
Want to understand it.
One thing I've learned is, hey, if it's over 7%, you need to bring in the engineers and say, why do we have such high line loss? If it's under 7%, you're doing a good job.
Okay.
And I know harmonics at schools used to create some line loss problems with fluorescent lights. Walmarts, things like that have a lot of fluorescents.
Good. Move on to monthly department reports. And we'll start with Casey.
So we continue to work with Cogsdale on the last few open items on the punch list as well. I'm still working with them to get a quote on adding a usage graph to our invoices. So we're still working on how we can do that and what it would look like. This was the first month we started the budget rollover process for those customers that are on budgets. So that was the first time for us. Learned a few things, but for the most part, not too painful. And we're working on reviewing our current collections policy to make some changes to bring to the board. Just since we've taken it over, we need to define some definites. At this point, we're going to do this and so forward. Under the finance side, we worked with Eide Bailey to finish up the 2018 financial statements. I've submitted numerous regulatory reports, including the attachment O, and I continue to work to gather information for the Auditor of State's re-audit.
So on the punch list, anything significant?
No, not really. There's some budgets or some deposit issues that we got to look through. There's one related to the telecom customers, just how their connections are on the billing system. So we're waiting for an update from ETI, and as soon as we get that, it can fall off. We actually I don't think we've had but one call since I've got back from maternity leave, because the things that are left are slow-moving pieces that are going to take a little bit of time yet. So I feel we're doing much better than we were.
Great.
Casey, what are your current collection with the policy? What are you talking about having to make potential changes?
More so once you've disconnected and you've left Waverly, or you don't have another service, how do we want to handle that? So we're going to, are we going to call for 4 months and then we got to turn it over to the credit collection agency that we use? At what avenue for the telecom are we going to pursue small claims? Because we can do that, to try to get equipment back if they don't, pay their equipment back. So more so setting those guidelines. Right now we're just calling on all of them, but at some point, is it more beneficial to turn it over to CPS and let them do that collection efforts?
Okay.
Good, thanks, Casey. Customer communications, Jen?
Yes, for the electric side of communications, we promoted this last month, the National Lineman's Day. We do that every year, April 18th. It's just a way that we can honor our lineman crew. Mm-hmm. So we did that, as well as a media release for our national awards. We received 3 awards that were nationally awarded, and so they were for the reliability, safety, and then also for the tree care, which is Treeline USA. We updated, obviously, the fact book that you had gotten, and then continual Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram postings.
Any feedback from your media release or anything, or any of those?
Yeah, I think, we try to promote that both on Facebook, the social media aspects, as well as in the newspaper. The Waverly newspaper gave us a very nice coverage of that too. So it's nice to receive those awards and to let our community know that nationally we're being recognized for some very hard awards to obtain through municipal utilities.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay, generation substations, Kurt.
Yes, last month, Can 2's aviation light had finally burned out after several years of use. EWT technicians were on site to do their quarterly maintenance, and it was replaced at that time. East Plant staff was able to assess the missing trash boom from the hydro units. It was determined, though, that the trash boom can't be safely removed in one piece. So when weather conditions allow and the river conditions come down later this summer, probably July, August through September time frame, we'll make provisions to remove that trash boom in pieces. There's just no salvage in it safely. So North Plant performed their quarterly capability test on engines 17 through 20. All the engines performed as noted, with no noted issues at this time. Our distribution crews are busy getting ready for the spring, summertime work in between the raindrops. But we're slowly moving ahead on underground projects and some overhead replacement pole replacements on the overhead system. We had safety training last month, which had fire safety, enclosed and confined spaces. Respiratory clearance fit tests were performed on operations staff, and the protection awareness annual training was completed as well. Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual.
Just like to add that we've gone 471 days without a lost time accident. And we have a new scoreboard that we put in the employees' room, so I'll see that. Hopefully that just keeps growing.
Okay. Thank you, Kurt. Okay, we'll move on to Waverly Communications Utility action items. Ratify trade accounts, Casey.
There really wasn't anything abnormal for this. Your quarterly payments are in here, but otherwise it was just regular operating business items.
I'll entertain a motion second to approve trade accounts.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, we'll move down to information items, monthly department reports.
For customer accounts, the CSR staff continue to perform the day-to-day functions of billing, troubleshooting technical calls, and scheduling installs. Right now, this service schedule is out a couple weeks, so it's a good thing to see that we're keeping busy. Jeff might attest to that. On the finance side, it's still, we worked with Eide Bailey, and we also submitted numerous regulatory reports for the 2018 financials.
Thanks, Casey. Jeff?
Okay. So on the telecom side, as Casey said, we're out a few weeks, so continue to activate new customers, respond to any incidents that come up, and we're also working to get all those drops that were laid on the ground over the winter, get those off as quick as possible. We've actually got a contractor in just for some temporary help to at least kind of push through those and get as many done as we can over the next week and a half. So hopefully all those that were on the ground over the winter, it's kind of a constant battle because we'll put temporary services up, but the ones that were placed over the winter, we'll get through those here pretty soon. All Waverly utility staff attended cybersecurity training, which included some focus on browsing safely, social engineering, and email phishing. So it's just kind of a simple quizzes, throw up incidents or throw up scenarios and how would you respond, and they get a score. They've got to pass all those before they can move to the next one. And then I think this was in the paper, but we tried to come to some agreement to distribute CBS Sports Network, but the requirements that they had and the additional costs for us, we just couldn't come to terms with them. So we dropped CBS Sports Network on our More Sports tier.
And Jeff, I believe customers can stream that channel?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. And Jen?
For the telecom side of things and marketing, we worked on ordering the golf promotional items. We are sponsoring the headline title for the Chamber Golf outing. We feel it's important to be a part of the business with the telecom as well, and so we like to be the headline sponsor for that. We also did an in-home or in-house USF mailing up to all of our phone customers. This was like a regulatory type of mailing that we had to get out, so we did that, as well as continuing our 9 great reasons to join Waverly Utilities. We have been doing the radio and TV, social media, but we also added the TV this time, so we have 4 rotating spots with featuring all of our telecom 9 great reasons to join, and we are really happy with the way those turned out, and everybody did a great job with them.
Yeah.
Hopefully you've seen them.
Seen them running. They look good.
I guess since maybe the public's listening, sometimes I see scuttlebutt on social media with people asking questions like, why would they spend money on a chamber golf outing promotional items? Why would they spend money actually advertising? You'd never expect this. First of all, the electrical utility is not subsidizing this type of advertising whatsoever, correct?
Right. This is being coded and billed all under the telecom side of it.
And if we want to grow as an entity and continue to grow, especially in the startup mode, you would never, ever expect any business or nonprofit to grow without marketing itself.
Correct.
Basic 101.
Right. We have competition on the telecom side, and so it would be dumb and not very business smart of us to sit back and do nothing and to not have a presence within our community.
Right. Agreed. And so,
And we definitely want to support our community events that we have.
well, and the chamber is such a great entity to support. You know, our business customers continue to grow, and that is a great avenue to be able to continue to advertise the services. So
Right.
I just want to say that I understand that, and I'm glad that you do what you do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I mean, I think I've asked this before, and I know it's really hard, but do we have any idea the impact that our radio and TV ads are having in terms of
Yeah, I wish there was a magic number that I could
Yeah.
come up with. I can follow Facebook easily. It shows me the impressions and that have
Right.
seen. And I was going to do a summary report when we were done with this campaign, but it's a guesstimate
Yeah.
of exactly how many people it has reached. But we try to cover all avenues. Hopefully that it's reaching somebody, whether TV, radio, newspaper, social media. We use every option that we can to try to reach out there.
I think another measurement tool, especially on the business side, is our market penetration. And I think we're close to, Jeff, 56% of businesses have chosen to go with us, and they're very satisfied with the service and reliability that we're providing. So that's a good measurement tool for me that we're doing the right things.
And we know when we started this campaign, the weather got great, so that helps too. But also we saw a huge uptick in installs coming up and booking out weeks out.
I mean, that's a good sign right there. So something's.
So a combination of the two, and just have a really good feedback from the community so far on the campaign.
All right, thank you. Okay, per Iowa Code 22.7, confidential competitive information, I'll entertain a motion second to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Secretary, please call roll.
Iendorf,
Yes.
Saberman,
Yes.
Buckingham.
Yes.
Brunson.
Yes.
Brunkhorst.
Aye.